Welcome, everyone. My name is Will Moss. I'm the CEO of Hbcu Connect. And every time I'm almost going to say I'm going to be your moderator for this event, but luckily I'm not the moderator. We have a great moderator from Microsoft who I'll introduce next, named Maria. But first, let me just give you a little bit of background, about Hbcu Connect and myself. I'm the founder of Hbcu Connect, launched in 1999, many years ago, as a platform to allow students and graduates from HBCUs to connect with opportunities and to connect with each other as the first social network for HBCU students and grads, and one of the first social networks for African American professionals, period. So fast forward to a few years later, we started to have lots of employers, Microsoft being one of them, tapped us on the shoulder and said, hey, can we recruit talent from your network? Our network is over 1.2 million members at this point. We said, of course, we love to partner with Microsoft. So we started that partnership out through online recruitment and job postings and resume database access for the Microsoft team members. But then a couple of years later into it, they said, hey, this is great. We're seeing the needle move on applications on our website, but we want to make sure that the HBCU Connect candidates get a good look from our hiring managers and our recruiters. So Will, how can we make that happen? So I met with my team, did a little powwow and said, you know what, let's do exactly what Microsoft is asking for. Let's host some after work networking events, and we'll bring in the right candidates with the right backgrounds for the teams that Microsoft is hiring in, and then invite the Microsoft teams to come out with their hiring managers, their recruiters, and also some African American representation or some Black representation, right? To talk to and speak to the life as a Black professional at Microsoft. And that kind of leads us to our event today. Of course, we were doing these events from Seattle to California to Texas to Atlanta, up the East Coast through North Carolina, DC, Maryland, Virginia, even New York, right? But like I said, fast forward to our current environment, we're doing the events virtually, but that opens it up for everyone. So definitely take advantage of this event. The opportunity here for you is that this is not just a branding event. This is an opportunity for you to potentially land an interview and be hired. So make sure to ask some good questions. Make sure you provide us with your latest resume, and we'll talk about next steps at the end of the event. But then also apply for opportunities at Microsoft, because people are getting hired from these events, and they've been very successful. And kudos to Microsoft for continuing to partner with us to host these events. So enough about myself and the background. Let's get into the meat and potatoes, and allow me to introduce our keynote speaker and moderator. I'm sorry, Maria Nagaga, lead principal product manager. So Maria, if you're ready.
I'm ready, Will. Thank you so much. So I want to start by saying thank you to every single person who has taken time out of their day today to join us. I know it's late. I know you're probably cooking dinner or you're rushing back from work. So I really appreciate you spending this evening or afternoon with us. As Will mentioned, my name is Maria Nagaga. I am a lead product manager at Microsoft, and I have been at Microsoft for almost 10 years now, right out of college when I graduated with a computer science degree. I am originally from Uganda, and right now at Microsoft, I am the lead product PM for ASP.NET, which is one of the largest web frameworks out in the world and has over 5 million customers. I am also one of the co-creators of something called .NET Interactive, which is an embeddable engine that supports developer experiences for experimentation, education, and just testing. And that's me. Now, one thing that Will mentioned, when you hear about the developer division, it's almost natural to feel like, oh, do I have to be insanely technical in order to be part of this team? And I wanted to take a moment that we take people through a journey. People go from writing their first line of code to being contributors to major open source products. But I also wanted to talk about the different experiences that we have here. I am a product manager or program manager. And what I do is that I focus on the vision of the product, depending on where it goes from today to 10 years from now. I am thinking about innovation. I am setting roadmaps. I am the advocate for the customer. My goal is to understand the customer. We also have our UX researchers. So our UX researchers are people that we work with who help us identify the customer's needs. They are designers, they are writers, they are storytellers. They look at data in order to make sure that we are making the right decisions for our customers. Gone are the days when we used to go write a bunch of stuff based on what we thought was right. Now we are building stuff based on what our customers need and what the industry is telling us. And then we have our software engineers. Our software engineers go to work every day and build and write code and make the product happen. And we'll be meeting people from all of these different experiences. I also want to talk about our business program managers who focus on the culture that we are building within the organization to make sure that we continue to grow it. And I also wanted to talk about our marketing and strategy people who think about the way we advertise and communicate and sell our product. And now, since I've given you a brief overview of myself, I would love to give you a brief introduction to the Developer Division. The Developer Division at Microsoft focuses on building and designing tools and services for our consumer. We have Visual Studio, which was our flagship product. It celebrated 20 years last year. It is an integrated developer environment. What does that mean? It means that we're creating a tool for developers similar to what you would use Word for. And we're making sure that within this place, developers can write their code, be productive, have things like diagnostics and debugging, as well as being able to easily integrate and deploy to the cloud. We have Visual Studio Code, which is a lightweight editor that is cross-platform, and also the #1 code editor in the world. I believe it has around 9 million developers who use it, incredibly popular in the web development space. It is used from individual developers learning to code to Fortune 500's building industry. We have our Azure Developer Services, where we focus on how do we make sure that once your application is in the cloud, that it's able to scale and you have the tools it needs to monitor and grow it. And then we have GitHub. So GitHub sits under the Developer Division. However, for today, we will not be recruiting for GitHub because GitHub is a separate entity. It's an independent company within a larger company. But we will drop a link in the chat window for you to go and look at GitHub careers. And we'll try our best to filter any single jobs that might come through to us to the GitHub careers group. We also focus on things like we build programming languages and frameworks, and we'll get to talk to one of the framework architects here in the Developer Division later today during our keynote. We build programming languages like C#, F#, VB, TypeScript. We also have the Open JDK, which is the Java Developer Kit. In addition to that, because we are the Developer Division, it's not only about our languages and making sure that the languages that are built within Microsoft work well. It's also about the languages that exist in the world because we support every single developer, whether we build the product in-house or not. We have a Python team, we have a Rust team, we have JavaScript teams, and our focus is to make sure no matter what language that you are writing in, that we are building the best experience for you. Now, I've talked a lot about our tools and our services, but I also want to talk about where can you work when you are at Microsoft, when you're in the Developer Division. Now, one might think that if you're at Microsoft, you have to go to Redmond in order to grow your career or be part of the Developer Division or any place at Microsoft. Well, I live in New York, and I've lived in New York and worked for the Developer Division for 6 years now. This was way before COVID, and I've had a very successful career as a remote worker, going from a junior PM to a lead PM, leading a very big product within Microsoft. So where are we based? We have the Redmond office in Washington State. We have Austin, Texas, and Atlanta. Those are some of our newer offices, and we're actively recruiting there. We have the Cambridge office in Massachusetts, and we have the Nerd Center that is known for innovation and having fun experiences at the garage. And we have the Raleigh, North Carolina office. But we also have the opportunity in some of our positions that enable you to work remotely. It is important for us that you feel comfortable and we build a culture that allows you to thrive where you are. And when we talk about culture, that is another foundation that is set within DevDiv. Now, before I jump into the culture piece, and I'm going to hand it over to a colleague of mine to talk about it a little bit more, let's talk about the why. Why would you want to work with us? As I mentioned, we have a variety of different roles, whether you're a person who loves to code, or a person like me who thinks more about innovation, or a person who wants to work more in understanding our customers, people who want to understand more about how do we build a stronger culture within the community, and also what if you wanted to do more of the strategy and marketing within the developer division. That's why it's important to work with us. We also have a tremendous variety of tech and opportunities that allow you to grow and learn. We have opportunities where people can easily move from one part of the organization to the other, which allows you to grow your skill set. You're building a tool that impacts millions, that's used by millions. You're building tools and languages and frameworks that are used by Disney and Walmart and SpaceX and all these different companies. And I think that's a pretty good thing to know that you are impacting and being part of a system that's going to impact millions, if not billions of people. So let's talk a bit about our team culture. DevDiv is intentional when it comes to creating a safe and inclusive and diverse culture within Microsoft and within our division. I want to give you an example. When I first joined DevDiv 6 years ago, I was the only Black woman in the entire division. It has been wonderful to see the number of Black women and the number of Black employees grow throughout the division to the point that I don't know every single Black employee out there. And I think that's pretty huge. There was a time when we fit in one single room with me on the call, to now we actually have to host a bigger room to fit us all in. And we hope that one of you on this call, if not as many of you on this call, continue to join our organization. And with that being said, I would love to bring my friend and my colleague, Erica Young, to talk about some of the culture work that we have in DevDiv. Erica?
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. Hey, everybody. So glad to see you here today, and welcome to our session on the Developer Division. I'm Erica Young, and I lead our cultural transformation here in the organization. And I'm from San Jose State University over in California, and made my way north over to Washington to be here in corporate to really think about what does it mean to be at your best, to be your best authentic self here in the division, and how do we make that real? So if you go to the next slide, next two slides, what we have here is we start with our mission. So the mission of the Developer Division is to earn the trust and love of developers across all languages, platforms, and make them successful as they build the applications of the future. Now, you don't see the words diversity and inclusion here, but what you can see is that across all languages and platforms, the trust and love of developers, that in itself is diversity and inclusion embedded in the mission of why we exist as a division. And so why we're here today, why we want to speak with all of you today, is because we're searching around the globe in very unique ways, in different ways than we have before, so we can get the best talent here in our teams. And we hope that you consider yourselves to join the Developer Division after this session today. So I want to give a little brief, and as we thought about the kind of segments we wanted to bring to you today, we really wanted to ground ourselves on culture, because we can make the best technology, we can do really great things, but if we're doing it and we're not enjoying ourselves, or we're not doing it in a way that is collaborative, it's going to be pretty painful, right? And so I wanted to start, if you go to the next slide, what is culture? And I'd love for all of you to put it in chat. This is super interactive. And by the way, I'm super comfortable sitting in silence as well. But I want to be able to hear from all of you, or see from all of you on your chat, on the chat. What is culture to you? Identity, thank you. Background, upbringing, way of life, yep. Trust. Great. Yes. Ways of communicating, Cultivating community, yep. Exactly. And so in short, it's the way things are. And so we can have food from home. Thanks, David. So what we can have over this period of working together, of the things that are written, the things that are said, what is spoken and unspoken, that makes up our culture. And so in the developer division, we're very intentional about what it is that we say we want to be, how we want to show up, and how we treat each other. But we also put in the time and effort in making that happen. And so if you go to the next slide, I have more questions for you. What is diversity and what is inclusion? You all are awesome. Thanks for putting in your comments. So actually, if you go in, I'll reveal it here. So I wanted to break it down. So diversity can be both inherent and acquired. So meaning inherent are things like gender, are things like our age. It could be things that are seen and unseen. Sometimes disabilities are not seen. There are things that are acquired over our lifespan. We can pick up new technological literacies, so we can learn new programming languages. Maybe we have different experiences. We've traveled. Maybe we've learned new languages. That is diversity. And then if we look at inclusion, inclusion is a verb. Inclusion are demonstrated behaviors. It's meaning, what am I doing to ensure that I am appreciative and I welcome the diversity of people, the diversity of backgrounds, the diversity of perspectives, and that together, if you go to the next slide, you need to have diversity and inclusion. You can't have diversity without inclusion. And that is something that we really strive to be intentional about. And so we wanted to emphasize this because diversity and inclusion is a significant cornerstone to the success of our culture in the developer division. And I want to share with you a little bit about the impact of why that matters. So if you go to the next slide, I want to share here, why does it matter? Because being your best authentic self enables innovation. And so some of you might be a little bit more knowledgeable in this space than I am, but we have something as humans, we have something in our brains called the prefrontal cortex. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to regulate rational thought. It allows us to critically think. It allows us to be creative. And what happens when we are in a fight or flight response, when our amygdala is triggered, our prefrontal cortex, as shown through some of the fMRI machines, that it lowers our ability to be creative. It lowers our ability to critically think, because when we're in that fight or flight response, which is a safety mechanism that our brains have, it shuts everything else down so that we can survive. So it's a defense mechanism. What does that have to do with our culture today? Well, it has a lot to do with it, because what we found, and through research, which there are lots of papers, and I can put it in the chat here in just a second, there's lots of research out there in the neuroscience world where if we experience triggers, if we experience conflict, if we experience things that make us really uncomfortable, it can trigger our amygdala, and then it'll reduce our prefrontal cortex's ability to create, to collaborate, to essentially innovate. And that if you go to the next tab here, that the Gottman Institute actually here in Seattle shows that it takes 5 positive experiences to counteract 1 negative experience. And so we know as a division that this is super important for us. And I'm sharing this context with you because it's going to set us up for what makes the developer division what it is. So additional research, if you go 2 clicks, Maria, one, we have high trust companies report that there is 76% more engagement, 74% less stress, and 29% more satisfaction in your lives. Why? Because when you think about a time, like say if you're with a friend or you're with a colleague and you have high trust, you know, when someone says they're going to do something, they do it, and they do it repetitively, that creates a sense of dependability. If you think about a time where you have to speak to another team and there's a misalignment, but your manager has your back, that creates less stress. And so what this does is it's some of the contributing factors into creating that high sense of belonging. And that really is important to us. And what we want to have here in the developer division is that a place where everyone can do their best work. And that means that we're able to really feel like we can just do great things together, and we can be creative, and we can create really cool technology, and essentially we can change the world for the better. Sounds huge, right? So if you go to the next slide, here's what it means to be in the developer division. We have our objective. It's our people objective. And that is number 1 for us in this organization. And it means for us that what we do is, in order for us to deliver success with our customers, with the world, we have to start with us. Because if we can't have our house in order, what makes us think we can do it with our customers? And so we start with cultivating that very strong culture. If you click through, Maria, we have our different values that we prioritize. And what we do as a division is we treat our culture like we do our products. And we listen to the diverse perspectives out there with our customers, with our partners, with our employees. We build empathy the same way with our different stakeholders. And we continuously develop the features to enhance our people's experiences through this level of experimentation. We use data to drive our decision making because we don't want to kind of just go off the cuff. There is a little bit of that because we do experiment. And we do spend a lot of our time thinking about and working towards how we make things better in the environment so that we can work better together. And all of this is really grounded on this act of inclusion. And we do that in our day-to-day jobs. It's actually required as Microsoft employees. We all have diversity and inclusion commitments or core priorities. And the idea is that it'll take all of us in this division with our customers, with our partners, and the activation of our leadership skills, because in Microsoft, we say that everybody is a leader because it's true. We don't have to have the most senior title to act inclusively. We don't have to have the most senior title to help enable an environment where collaboration can happen. We do have the ability to all learn, and it's really segmented on our learning journey and our ability to put in the effort to learn. And it's really around what are all of us doing so that, Maria's of the world, Brandon, David, all of you here on this call can show up as your best authentic self and essentially, excuse my language, kick ass at what you do. So I'm going to give you an example. What does that look like? So we go to the next slide, and actually you can go through my builds. We treat our culture as a product. Like I said, we do experiments, we build together, we learn, we measure. We also have here an example. So this is a live experiment that's going on today on how do we make code reviews more inclusive. So there is a work stream that I lead, and it's called Experimenting on Diversity and Inclusion. Again, treating our culture as a product. And so there was this theme actually that surfaced. We crowdsourced ideas with people in the division, and they were talking about, okay, one of the most natural ways for people across the division to interact are through code reviews. So what can we do to assess whether code reviews are inclusive or not? So in the first year of experimentation, that's what they did. They conducted, they went through a customer development process where we talked to different people across our own division to say, what's it like for you to be a part of a code review? And from a scale of 1 to 10, how inclusive do you think it is? And what might be the case for it to be inclusive or non-inclusive? So this year, what the group did is experimenting on creating an add-on here, like what is it called, Maria? Help me out here.
An extension.
An extension, thank you. And I'm like, what is this? So what they did here when they talked about code reviews was they created an extension to provide, it's kind of like Grammarly, but for inclusivity. And they have word recommendations of things that might be perceived as negative. Maybe there's ways or suggestions the comments can be more constructive. So it's really about how are we better supporting each other's development, because that's why people submit their codes for review. And then how do we share constructive feedback versus something like super unhelpful, like your code's naive? Like there's no way to even improve that. Naive, what does that mean? And it's like you can't really follow up, right? And so right off the bat, they're testing this. They're testing it live with the team. They're going through some of the telemetry data to see how helpful is this or not. And then we're going to see the results actually here in the next couple of weeks. So that's an example of what it's like to be in the developer division at the macro level. At the micro level, I'd love for you to think about this personal exercise. And this personal exercise is really about for you, as you all start thinking about the internships you're going to join, the jobs you want to seek, explore for yourself, what does it mean for you to be at your best? And the questions to think about are ones listed here. How do you learn? How do you learn at your best? For me, I'm more visual. So I need to see slides. I also need to hear elaboration and context for the things that I'm learning. But I know that about myself. And that cross applies to me in my role today and when I started my career. The next thing is, what do you need to feel comfortable contributing your skills and capabilities? Do you need to have kind of that support, like maybe a buddy mechanism where a buddy can say, hey, I think Maria has something to share? Or do you feel comfortable sharing your skills and capabilities or your ideas? And think that through. What do you need for that? Another piece is, what does it look like for you to collaborate well with others? Do you need to have segmented time where there's ideation? Can you just free flow and just kind of participate, or does it need to be more structured? Thinking about that is really important. And then the last piece, more importantly, is how might you communicate the above of what you thought about with your manager, with your teams? Because trust me, what I'll say is nobody can read minds. Because if you could read minds, we probably don't need to work, right? But that's not the case. And so kind of helping others that you work with understand your preferences, the diversity of your preferences, so that they can help better include, that's the way to go, because it's a way for us to also put in, our own effort so that we can work well with the teams that we have. So with that, that is the end of my segment. I hope that it was helpful in giving you a preview of what it's like to be in the developer division. I'm going to stick around for any comments or questions. So feel free to put it in the chat and I'll interact with you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. There's so much about what Erica's just shared that resonates me. The whole idea of having an inclusive Grammarly check is fundamental in making sure that we grow people's careers and they actually feel that they're included in the team and they don't feel like they're being judged. Also, when you think about different ways that you learn and have to present information, like one of the things that I have is that I am dyslexic and I have ADHD. And a lot of times I am handed these huge charters of things that I need to go and accomplish. And one of the things that I found very useful is that I've been able, because of the culture work that has been pushed and thriving within DevDiv, I have learned how to communicate with others on what I need to do to be successful. I'm a visual learner, so I have done things from like writing sketches and plays in order to demonstrate what I'm trying to do, or sketching out things as well. So it just speaks to how much we do value innovation and culture here. And I just love everything that Erica has presented. So Erica, thank you so much for making the time. This has just brought up so many happy memories for me of working here. And I just want to let everyone know that this is real, right? This actually happens within DevDiv, and we're continuing to grow and learn in this area. So we've spoken about culture. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is it's demo time. Like, what is a presentation from an engineering team without demos? And we've shown you a glimpse of everything that we've built here. And I'm inviting Mark, who is a senior product manager here at Microsoft, to walk us through a demo. And so Mark, give us a quick intro to yourself, and then I'll give you the screen.
Alrighty, hi everybody. My name's Mark Downey. I'm actually from Wolverhampton, England, a small, relatively small city in the middle of England. I've been here at Microsoft for almost 3.5 years now. I'm actually working remotely also. I was also doing that before it was trendy. I actually graduated in England, and I am now a member of the Microsoft team. Really, really happy to be part of DevDiv. And I'm eager to kind of share some stuff with you. Miri, you're on mute. Can I jump in? Okay, all right. Then let me get going here. So we have tools here at DevDiv that impact a bunch of different folks in lots of different areas. We have tools that impact the newbie CSS student. We have tools that help the hobby developer who's sitting at home thinking about the brand new revolutionary Apple service. We target developers that are architects and trying to solve issues at scale. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about just a small subset of the tools and services that PMs, engineers, data scientists, UX designers, all in this division have created. In fact, some of the engineers and PMs that we're going to, that on this call actually were the ones who delivered these features. And every day we have the opportunity to impact millions of developers across the globe, who in turn will impact millions of customers. So today I'm going to focus on two areas, .NET and the Visual Studio family of tools. Okay, all right, let's start here. I'm going to actually start sharing my desktop. Right, the first area I kind of wanted to talk about was learning. For most of us in the tech world, we kind of started this journey with a bit of curiosity. And fortunately for some of us, we actually had a little bit of privilege and access as well. So for me, it came in the form of a PC or a Mac. But what we're also recognizing is that not everyone has the same lived experience. So one of the questions we are asking ourselves is, how do we remove as many barriers as possible from people to learn new technology? And one of my favorite tools for learning is try.net. And in fact, our host, Maria, was the one who was really thinking about how do we onboard the next 1 million developers, right? For me, I started with an actual PC. I bought a book, I installed some software. I had 7 CDs, which should tell you how old I am. But Maria introduced this idea that we can, if somebody's starting their journey in the browser, why not just complete it there with coding right there in the browser? So on the screen, you should be seeing right now try.net, which is a site we have where you can literally try code right there in the browser. There's no ceremony, there's no setup, there's nothing to install. You're literally seeing code in the browser, and I can go ahead and execute that code and it will compile and run. I can actually go beyond that and actually start editing it and run it again. So you can imagine now that there's a lot of our modules, our Learn modules online that are transforming, not just from showing you how it works, but literally inviting you to test out how it works. You don't need an expensive device. You don't, all you need is maybe a tablet or even a phone, and now we can get you started. What you're going to realize, and the theme of what we hopefully should be showing you, is that we're removing barriers to entry. We're trying to make it so that anybody who has a will can get going. And so this is a simple exercise here I'm reading through, and I'm going to actually start running through coding here. This is all about try.net, and I love the fact that we have more accessible ways for folks to get started. But in addition to that, I love thinking about Visual Studio as Visual Studio and the Visual Studio family of tools as a mechanism for people who are hobbyists and professionals to get started. One of the things I love about the mission we have here is that we embrace the idea of coding wherever you are most happy, right? So I'm personally happiest on a Windows machine. It's incredibly versatile and the developer environment is excellent for me. What made that, there was a couple of things that made that happen. There was a really transformative piece of tech with Windows terminals, which I'm showing you right now, and the Windows subsystem for Linux. And together with Visual Studio Code, we have a really compelling cross-platform strategy. So the terminal, what you're seeing here, is actually a way in which I can house multiple shells. And the shell I'm showing you right now is PowerShell. But what's excellent about Windows Subsystem for Linux is that I can actually also invite Linux into the story. And what you're seeing right now is me at an Ubuntu prompt on my Windows machine. And that's real Linux running on my machine. In fact, if I were to look at Task Manager, I'd see a tiny VM sitting there, and it's running real on my machine. All right, so actually I could do the traditional type commands like apt-get and install npm if I wanted to. If I actually right here, in fact, if I wanted to forget Brave and maybe Trapped, I would start using Vim here. But if that's what, if you know, if Vim is your thing, then I'm all for it. Let me see if I can actually get out. Yeah, okay, perfect. But for me, I actually would prefer Visual Studio Code. Now, as Maria mentioned earlier, Visual Studio Code is an incredibly popular code editor. It's free for everyone to use. It's built on open source. It runs everywhere. So if you're a Mac user, Linux user, it doesn't matter where you are. Our open source tools are wherever you want to be. Its Visual Studio Code is also language agnostic, so it runs Rust, Python, C#, TypeScript, PHP, PowerShell, all the things. It has become the editor of choice for millions of developers across the planet. And I'm just going to run a quick program for you. I want to show you how you can make a quick app running on Linux, running on your Windows. It's kind of almost like Inception. You're running on Linux, but we're going to be running on Windows, okay? All right, so I'm going to make a directory. We're going to be using the archetypal hello world a lot today. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and jump into hello world. And what I'm going to do is what I just typed here is code dot. I have Visual Studio Code installed in my Linux, inside Linux, and it's going to, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And that starts up Visual Studio Code. If you look at the bottom left, let me zoom in right here, you'll see it's opening remote. It's not actually, it's a Windows window, but it's actually opening it remotely. Okay, and in fact, you'll see now it's Ubuntu. I'm actually using an Ubuntu Linux distro. So I'm going to hit Control N. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, select a language. We're going to make it JavaScript because we're going to do a little bit of Node because we love everybody here. I'm going to grab a little bit of code and drop this into here just to kick me off. If I can hit save here, and we will call this hello world. If I could all right, we saved that. Hit save, and we're going to hit F5. And what should happen right now is that it kicks off, and now I have a web server running in Ubuntu. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my browser here. We have a web server running in Ubuntu, running on Windows, and I've got my little hello world. Just in case you don't believe me, I'm going to set a breakpoint and hit refresh. So again, Windows is incredibly versatile, but if you like to be on Linux, be in Linux. If you like to be on a Mac, be on a Mac. We have tools that are developed for you to make it as easy as possible to get going. Let's move on to something else. So I have personally and professionally been involved with .NET and Visual Studio for years. And so for me, that's where I am most comfortable. And as Maria mentioned, we have over 5 million developers using Visual Studio family of products. We also have .NET 6, the most loved framework for the last 3 years in a row, according to Stack Overflow. And we continue to be one of the highest velocity open source projects since 2017. So in addition to Visual Studio Code, we also have our flagship integrated development environment. We have Visual Studio 2022. Visual Studio 2022 can scale to the largest of projects, the most complex of projects that you have. We use Visual Studio to help us diagnose issues and for visualizing multi-threaded applications, for dealing with working with colleagues across sessions, cloning repos, for doing AI-powered completions, which I'll show you a little bit later. But today I just kind of want to show off one of our latest patterns that we've been kind of using recently, which is minimal patterns. And minimal patterns are designed again to remove the complex scaffolding, to reduce the ceremony we associated with creating brand new services for cloud services. In fact, David Fowler, one of our architects, is on the line here. He's one of the engineers here that was kind of pivotal, as was Maria and Safia. So on this line, you literally have the folks who are inventing the things I'm showing you today. So let me go ahead and create a new project here. I just want to show you this really quickly. I'm going to open an ASP.NET project. I'm going to start a brand new one. I'm going to go ahead and accept the defaults. Next, and accept the defaults. We're in .NET 6 now, so I want to go forward there. So this will create a project. When I was coming up, this particular act alone would probably create for me about 4 or 5 folders, I'd maybe say 24 files. But what we've kind of thought about is reducing the complexity, just so that you can focus on the code that's most important to you, your code. So if you look at my solution on the right, my project on the right, you'll see 2 files, only 2 files. This would be 20 plus files in the past. And one of them is program.cs, and it only has 4 lines of code, right? This is as bare bones as you can imagine. It's simply saying, when you go to this root of this site, show me hello world. So that other program I showed you, this is kind of emulating it simply in just 4 lines. And this minimization of ceremony really helps me to just get started with the code that's most important to me, right? So right now I'm building it. And in fact, it's just started the diagnostics tools window. You'll see it's the memory profile of this particular app. You'll see the CPU usage of this particular app. And in fact, the diagnostics tools is my area of Visual Studio. So this is all the stuff I love to show off. And again, here we are, a brand new app in 4 lines of code, literally in just a few seconds. And if I wanted to add more to this app, I mean, it's as simple as adding additional map gets and defining new routes. I'm literally asking developers, or reducing the amount of time it takes for developers to get going. Okay. If there's any questions on any of this stuff, please put it in the chat as well. Literally, the folks who wrote this are here today, so please feel free to ask any questions you have on that. One more thing I just want to show off. Part of my side hustle is that I'm a keeper of an open source project called DOSBlog. DOSBlog has been a open source blogging engine in .NET community for a very, very long time, and I've taken over it more recently. It's great for those folks who are trying to escape Twitter. If you want to do your own blog, this is the chance to go ahead and get going with a brand new blogging engine. So what I wanted to show off, though, with my code in DOSBlog is the AI-powered code completions, right? So we've been talking about what engineers do here today, and we've been talking about what PMs do, but we're also focusing on what data scientists can do for us. And with the data, all this data and telemetry that we are collecting, we're thinking about the ways we can use that and the workflows that we know are most important to developers. We're thinking about the way in which we can help you write code once you've got going, okay? So imagine I have this stubbed out method here. In fact, this action on this controller, this set password. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and start typing if, okay? And literally my hands are off the keyboard at this point, but if you can see in gray right there, it put in gray some additional text. This wasn't me, this was our AI-powered completion. It's saying, I think the very next thing you probably want to write is model equals to null. I'm speaking to developers at the moment, so just bear with us. But what's actually happening here for you data scientists is that it's looked at the model, it's been looking at data across open source projects and saying, what is the most likely whole line that I can suggest to this developer? And that seems like a reasonable thing. So to accept that, instead of typing that entire sentence, all I have to do is hit tab. And now I'm actually starting to code using the AI-powered completion with me. And in fact, that next line has just popped up as well. So I've got model equals the new set password, because it said actually if the model, and just note, it really did pick that up from the parameter from the actual method itself. And so it's saying, well, you're likely to want to make this value real, but maybe I want to do something slightly different here. So I'm going to start typing return, and it already knows that likely then if you've got bad data or data that is null, maybe the best response is to say, let the person know who called this API that it's a bad request. So I could accept that. But I want you to know that this is really not just about guessing, it's looking at the context of my program. So if I were to change this code and say it's not null, right, and then go back to return, now it's actually suggesting I return content, right? So the AI-powered suggestions is taking the wisdom of the open source community, and it's presenting it to me here, right in Visual Studio, helping me to be as productive as I possibly can. Thank you so much for your patience for listening to me. My name's Mark Downey. If you need to reach out to me, please do so. I'm on Twitter at PapaString, and I'll hand over to Maria.
Thank you, Mark. I am always blown away when I get the opportunity to see Mark demo stuff. He is definitely a developer that inspires me, and he just makes everything look incredibly amazing. So thank you, Mark. Can we get a round of applause for Mark? All right, so I'm going to switch back to my deck, and then we're going to introduce our keynote speaker. So the way we're going to be doing our keynote today, it's going to be in an interview style. And my PowerPoint is loading. It should show up in a bit. When you can see it, let me know.
Okay. Reset.
Doing a little bit of a reset. Okay.
Yep.
It's just, I think it's just feeling the excitement, David, of the day. Like, we just have so much energy, and teams might be having FOMO at the moment. Like, I want to participate in the event, and you're making me work. All right. So, David, I wanted you to like have a grand entrance, but you went off camera really fast. So you can go off camera if you want. Yeah, turn it off, and then we'll restart, and then I'll set it up. Okay. So we have talked about culture and products. We saw demos. We talked about jobs. But what is it like to be Black at Microsoft? What is the Black experience? And we're going to have a panel, but I'm going to first start with a one-on-one conversation with David Fowler, who is a partner software architect here at Microsoft. He's originally from Barbados. So I want to take a moment to read David's bio, because I had to take a breath so as to read it all through. David has been at Microsoft for 14 years, where he has worked on developer frameworks and tools in the .NET space. He's one of several open source creators. He has created NuGet, which is a package manager for .NET, Signal R, ASP.NET Core. He has also architected things like the Azure service, Signal R service. David is working on microservices right now. He's also working on a number of things. When he is not working, he is busy with his 2 kids and his wife, or playing tennis. And one fun fact about David is that David claims that he and Rihanna went to the same school, and we have just chosen to believe that. So with that being said, David, come join us.
Hey, everyone. It's funny, I'm blushing, but I'm also black, so you can't tell.
All right. So David, are you ready for the hard questions?
Oh yeah. And
Okay.
I did, like Rihanna and I did go to school together. She might not remember me right now, currently, possibly, but her friends definitely do, for sure.
Let's say all right to that, right? Like we will say, I believe you, David. I have chosen to believe you because like is it 6 degrees of separation? You have got me this one step closer to the queen. So
exactly.
I just realized. So David, you and I have worked together on a couple of things. Just recently, minimal APIs. You know, I focus on simplicity. You make sure the simplicity is achieved.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I just wanted people to get to know you, like as a person. Could we start by explaining what exactly a partner software architect is?
That's a good question. So I guess technically speaking, partner is a title on the chain of levels at Microsoft. It's funny, when I first joined the company, I referred to the levels as an RPG. So you're playing a game and you want to get more experience to get to the next level over and over. Partner is somewhere up there on the totem pole. But my role as an architect is essentially to make sure that things are intact, make sure when we make changes or new decisions or new designs that things will all work out. I have a broad picture of the design of like many things. So I think one of my roles is to, whenever a new thing pops up or a thing is being changed, to make sure that it fits with the principles, the goals, the design of the original design that we had. Sounds kind of fuzzy. I'm kind of in meetings all day. I talk to a bunch of people. I do a lot of planning, but I also do a lot of deep coding and future work. So trying to project where we're going to go, trying to make sure things are kind of running. It's kind of the grab bag of things that I work on every day.
And correct me, weren't you the first Black partner in DevDiv and one of the youngest at the company as well?
So they say. Rumor has it. Yeah, I think so. DevDiv has. I'm an individual contributor. I do not have reports. I am just a lone contributor, person that does work. And there are, I think, only a few of us that are partner ICs in the org, and I think I'm the only Black partner IC in the org. Wow. So, yeah.
So, how did you get to be you? How did you get to this place? How did you break into tech? And like, what was your journey from like coming into Microsoft for the first time and being you?
I guess I'll start from like when I was a fetus. I was born, I'm kidding. I got interested in programming and I guess computers really early on because of gaming. See my shirt?
Yep.
I love gaming. So I used to play games all the time. My dad owned a computer store. He brought home computers super early. I played games. I wanted to make games. That's how I got into coding. So around age 10, 9, 10, I went on the internet because there was a new phenomenon, and I tried to learn how to make games. And through that, I started coding in QBasic, trying to learn how to make games. Went to secondary school, which is high school in America, and I did IT there, which is like light programming, and I knew from that moment that I wanted to do it. So like the only thing was to figure out, what I should be doing to push towards that goal. I started coding more and more, and then I ended up going to college in Florida, where it's funny, I did a computer engineering degree, but I changed majors after my first day because computer engineering was a lot of hardware, and I wanted to like code. So I changed to computer science, and I chose that school specifically because I knew Microsoft came to the career fair. I had done some research, I figured it out. And I had been coding a long time before I joined college, right? So in the intro classes, I kind of knew stuff that, from my previous experience. And me and a friend worked on a game. And we didn't know what we were doing, but it was like looking back, now I know we didn't know what we were doing, but it was fun. We made a game. We made a programming language, actually, freshman year of college. And the first
what was
career
the name
fair,
of the programming language? You can't just do it.
It was called GFS. So what I learned was that when you make games, you typically have an in-game scripting language that you use to like make levels and stuff. So my friend had done a bunch of game design from Italy, and we got together at school. We became friends, started to build this game. And at the career fair, we took our laptops and we showed the recruiters at like EA, Microsoft, and other companies this game. And they were kind of just like, "You're freshmen and you made this game." We're kind of like, "Yeah." We didn't really know that it was like a big deal, but we did it just because it was fun, and we thought it would help us stand out, right, in the career fair. So from that, it led to me getting an interview on campus, and that was the time when Microsoft did the crazy interviews, where like you're in the middle of a forest and you hear a pin drop, like, "What color are your shoes?" Like those kind of weird questions. So after getting through those interviews, I got an internship in Seattle. I did 2 internships at Microsoft on the .NET team, and eventually I joined full time.
All right. So you joined full time in which year?
2008. And I was one of the set of interns who went to Bill Gates' house before he like stopped the event. So I got to like go to Bill Gates' house. My first internship. It was pretty awesome.
Was the food good? Like, did he have enough spice? Like, was it
He gave us
seasoned?
burgers. Nah, it was pretty tasteless. I mean, it
wasn't seasoned.
It needed
Okay.
hot sauce. It was
No hot sauce? Oh.
What was interesting though, like going to his house, they take your phones before you go. They take all your stuff, and you get into a bus and you go into his house, and he has like this giant pasture, and like the interns are hanging out there, and then he comes out and the interns like storm him, and I was in the middle of the circle, and he was like this close to me, and I shook his hand. I didn't wash it for like a couple hours.
I don't think you want that recorded that you didn't wash your hands.
Okay, but I got smarter. I got smarter for a little bit, and then I washed my hands afterwards.
So knowledge transferred, and that led to your career growth at Microsoft over the past couple of years. So we got into like how you got here. Like, what are some of like, what was your journey? Because we've talked about the journey of how you got here, but what is your journey at Microsoft been like?
Yeah. So I'll tell you something that was I guess a culture shock. When I moved from Barbados to the States, I knew about the Black experience from like TV and like watching like on pop culture, but experiencing it was interesting. So when I joined my computer science class at college, I was like one of 4 Black people in the class, and that ratio transferred to Microsoft when I joined full time. Although I did meet another Black intern, that was fun, and we're still friends today. But at Microsoft, I would say my first couple of years, like, it was fun because I had a couple of friends that I knew from my internships and from Barbados and from school that were at Microsoft. So I think, as well as work being interesting, having a set of people that were your friends, that like you're finding your tribe, was super important for me. Having people that I knew and worked with that I enjoyed was fun. As for my career, I want to say part of my career growth was due to the fact that I got to work on a lot of like interesting V1 projects, and I had the chance to learn from an architect really early on in my career. So I was like paired with an architect. We would work on a lot of things together really early on. I got to work on things that were impactful, and I didn't know until like I looked back and reverse engineered, like, wow, that was a big deal kind of thing. For example, when we built NuGet, like we built the package manager for .NET, and I was a dev. But it didn't occur to me that like this is gonna be the package manager for .NET for all of time, and like, so that looking back at those things, I think I learned a lot from the architect. He kind of taught me how to like, sell ideas. I think I would kind of go off looking for ideas to go pursue, which led to me creating a lot of technology, I think, early in my career. So I ended up creating, so it's funny, when you read the bio, I always think like, oh yeah, I remember like doing that stuff because it's fun. NuGet, SignalR have a similar story, right? Like I was looking for gaps, looking at feedback from customers, trying to figure out what we could do. And I remember specifically one event where we had this thing called the MVP Summit, where our people we trust and know for opinions would come to Microsoft every year, and we'd show them what's next, right? And they would give us feedback. And my second year at Microsoft, they were showing the things that I had built on the side as like the future work. And no one told me, by the way. That was like a by the way,
Wow.
we have all these things. And they're watching like, holy crap, I just had that stuff together like last week, like it was a thing. But that gave me the idea that, looking for gaps, trying to fill holes, trying to find customer pain points was a thing that kind of helped boost your career. And you also get to learn a bunch too. So I kind of did that over and over.
That's something like I've noticed that you and I have a little bit like similar, where I think I built my career so fast at Microsoft in the developer division, because my whole goal is like, yeah, this sucks and we need to improve it, or this is an opportunity where we need to grow and thrive. And I think coming from that place where it was about the customer more and about the experience more, and then all of a sudden people respect your opinion, you're just like, really? Like, I don't have to convince you anymore? Like, that's huge. So you touched on it a little bit, but people are here for the real tea. What has a Black experience been like for you at Microsoft?
Really interesting. So there's being Black in Seattle, which is like one part of the whole design and problem space. I'll tell a fun story, and this is recorded, so it'll be like rated like G. When I started in DevDiv, like 14 years ago, I remember when we changed buildings a while back, I used to make jokes because there were so little Black people. I used to say there was one per floor, right? And we had 3 floors. Just as a fun joke. No, it's one of us per floor. You can't have more than one. And one day I got in the elevator and this guy started talking to me. He started like telling me about this project. I was like, I don't know this person. And then they realized halfway through that I wasn't the Black person that they knew. And I was like, I think you got the wrong person. And they were ashamed. It was a moment, but it spoke to how few of us there were at the time. It just wasn't, there's just like, there's enough that you could count in one hand, right? Yeah. It was that way for a long time. So if you saw more than one Black person on the team, it was like, whoa, what happened there? I mean, even now, right? It's improved a lot, but like, it's still not super commonplace. Yep. When I joined, there was this thing called BAM, RERG for Black on Microsoft. I knew it existed. It was this really big corporate thing. It didn't feel like a small community. So I never really got involved with BAM at a deep level when I first joined the company. It was mostly just me knowing some Black people because I've like networked with people either like at Microsoft. And whenever you saw a Black person, like you gave the eyes and the nod, like the Black nod, you did the yeah, and like that continued, right? What I found funny was when I tried to get a haircut, I got a nice fade for this presentation. When I remember thinking back to when I was trying to find a barber, and what I would do is I would go to the store and see if they had like a bunch of Black people in a poster. And if they didn't, I would just leave the shop because like I assume you didn't know, right? As a litmus test, right? I didn't know. Yeah. I had to get this fade. So it took me, I want to say 5 years to find a good like barber that I actually want to go to and keep going over and over. And that's a small thing, but you wouldn't believe one of the first questions people ask as new hires that are like Black is like, where do I get my hair done? It's so common. So I think those small things kind of add up, right? And I think now, I hope now we have better ways to get that information. Because it's not just a job. It's like, I moved here, I lived here, right? So I moved from where I was in a mostly Black society. It's like 95% Black to where I'm like in the minority. That was a big shift for me. I'd say fast forward to 5 years, maybe last 5 years, there's a lot more BAMs. There's big BAM and there's like BAMs for the org and for your division. And I think that brings back the family feel to BAM. So now like Div BAM, our BAM, like feels like a family. And it really feels like we can all hang out together and like have fun. And even though there's still a big corporate BAM for like money and like big events and sponsoring and mentoring and internships, the small BAM is what keeps you around because you feel like you have people you can rely on and talk to, right? And I think that experience in my last like 5 years has been way better and different from what I did before. I would say I enjoyed work before. It was fine. It was great. I love my job. I love what I work on. I love my coworkers. Having a community nearby makes it way more enjoyable. where you can be yourself and talk about common things together. It's a big difference.
No, I love it because like one of the things, because I mentor so many Black women in div and across Microsoft, the number one thing is like, where do I get my hair braided? It's like the number one thing, and we're still struggling with like that sense of community. And I want to bring it down to like, you talked about family, and this is the perfect time for us to introduce a bit of our family. So I wanted to, like David, I want you to, with me, introduce some of the people that we work with. So I want you to meet other engineers who work in DevDiv, and bit by bit, they'll come off camera and I'll give them a big intro, and then we'll have a panel and we'll have a discussion where we'll go over some of the questions we had with David as well, going to some other questions about the Black experiences within DevDiv, within Microsoft. So I want to start with Safi Abdallah. Safi Abdallah is a senior software engineer, originally from Chicago. She works on ASP.NET with David and I. Next,
Drum roll.
we have Deron Mota, who is a partner director of engineering, originally from Florida. He owns Visual Studio Client, NuGet, .NET MAUI, XAML, and tools. He has like, I think, Deron, I would say like 100 plus people are in your reporting chain. You have like a pretty big organization under you.
Something like that, yeah.
Leslie Richardson, a lot of Florida on this call. Leslie Richardson is also from Florida. She's a technical product manager. She knows the debugger within Visual Studio in and out. She is a pro in diagnostic tools. She understands the Visual Studio extension. Every single time I talk to her, I learn more about Visual Studio. Leslie, thank you for joining us. And we have VOG of DevDiv BAM, Brandon Bainham, Principal Engineering Manager, originally from Buffalo, New York. Brandon owns data platform and AI and experiences. Like, this is a moment I'm going to make Brandon blush for a bit. Brandon is the foundation of DevDiv BAM. He has barbecues for us. He is our big brother. He is our support system. He has hired CVPs at this company. Brandon has been at Microsoft for over 30 years. Brandon, thank you for joining us. I hope I didn't make you blush too bad, Brandon. Yeah. So
It's all good.
Stop presenting so we have like a wider screen so everyone can see your faces. And then we'll go in and start having a conversation. So now we're going to do a panel where I'll ask similar questions. I will have it in an order. So starting with Leslie, then we'll move to Safia, Brandon, Deron, and David. Feel free to chime in. And maybe for the first question, you don't need to. But tell us a little bit about your journey from new hire to Microsoft to where you are now. Leslie?
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Maria. So hi, everyone. I'm Leslie. I've been at Microsoft for 4 years now. And for me, I think I'm a PM. And I feel like for a lot of people who are PMs, it's something that you don't go into college knowing that that's what you want to do. I didn't even know PMing was a thing, to be honest. And it turned out I just really liked talking to customers and while also being able to have that development access and being able to design on top of things. I did graphic design before I discovered code. So it seemed like a natural fit for me. And then after some ups and downs and after being bribed with donuts by Microsoft on college campus, ended up being a PM initially on the debugging team. And it was definitely a trial by fire for me. I felt like I was going in with some knowledge of what I was going to be doing, but then the first couple weeks in, I got an ask like, hey, you need to give a talk to thousands of people at that giant developer conference that we have every year called Build on debugging tips and tricks. And like, here I am, a college student where I was never formally taught how to use a debugger. And then I'm on this team where I'm expected to become an expert on it in the span of like a month to convey it to a bunch of people who've been in the industry for longer than I've been alive in some cases. So it was really intimidating. I definitely had the imposter syndrome going. I barely knew what an abstract was. Luckily, I had a ton of support from my team and stuff. And it was definitely like one of my first main public speaking gigs that I had done. So that kind of created its own path into some public speaking engagements that I do on and off again when I'm not working on extensions in Visual Studio these days as well. So it's been quite a ride. It wasn't a ride I expected, but I've been enjoying it.
Safia?
Yeah, so all throughout college, I had told myself that I was never going to go the big tech company route. I was deep in the startup verse. And actually, my first job out of college was working at a startup in Chicago. But I had kind of arrived to Microsoft via a referral from someone who I worked with on an open source project that I had been contributing to for about 5 years at that point. So they reached out to me. They said, hey, Microsoft is looking to kind of start using this open source technology a little bit more in one of their products. And they're interested in hiring someone who's an expert on it. And that happened to be me. And that's kind of how the doorway to me working at Microsoft got opened. I actually worked adjacent to Brandon for a little bit for about a year. And then I switched teams, and now I work a little bit closer to David on .NET and ASP.NET. And that's kind of been my transition over the 3.5 years that I've been at the company so far.
Daron?
Hey, Maria. Hey, everyone. I'm Daron Motter. I've been at Microsoft, it's like 19 years now. Similar to David, when I started, one of the projects I worked on was basically a V1 project, and that's where I got a lot of my experience as an engineer within Microsoft. It was called Expression Blend, and the idea was to build out a suite of tools like Adobe, like for creative professionals, which we did ultimately build and launch, but eventually that product got folded into Visual Studio, and I've been in Visual Studio ever since then. At the time, just really focused on, again, designers and creative professionals as customers, and now focused on developers as customers. And like, I love to just really just underscore, I mean, I know folks are on the call primarily for, career purposes, listening to David talk about his career and a lot of the challenges and a lot of things that really impacted him, working on a V1 product, getting mentorship from someone who's like really experienced very early on in your career. Those were a lot of similar kind of experiences that I had in my career. And I think they're also like one of the key reasons that I still am at Microsoft today.
Brandon?
Yeah, my path to Microsoft in a lot of ways is really similar to David's. I got into computers pretty early. My dad worked at Ford, and he actually sold some Ford stock because I was so into computers, and he bought me an Atari 400. I spent many hours sitting in front of that programming in Atari Basic. Eventually went to Princeton. Ended up doing 2 internships at Microsoft. I actually met my wife looking for a BAM meeting on my second internship. And then started full time back in 1992. I think I said in the chat, the very first thing that I did was tested setup for Visual Basic 2.0. And then I've worked on many products over the years. Worked on the original version of .NET. I owned the Windows Forms portion of .NET for a while. Worked on the WPF Designer in Visual Studio and a variety of other products. In the last few years, I've been in the big data space. I own our pipeline for processing a lot of our product telemetry. So my team basically processes about 80 terabytes of data per day. So definitely a big data scenario is what I've been working on lately.
So I want to make sure we also get to the Q&A questions coming in from the audience. So like, Will, whenever you have a chance, just drop them in the chat so you see them. But, in a couple of words, what recruiting advice would you give to someone today? I'm going to start with Safia and then move to Leslie, Daron, Brandon, and then David.
Yeah. So I can share something from my own experience when I was kind of interviewing at Microsoft and just getting out of college and trying to find a job, which is like a really stressful thing to do. I'm an engineer. I spent a lot of time working on
code problems, and I didn't actually do them on a computer. I would like do them on my phone, or sorry, on my notebook as I was commuting to my startup job, or I was commuting to classes when I was doing my degree at Northwestern. So it's just like studying all the time and writing code on paper and really getting comfortable with writing code and expressing my ideas and thoughts on it. And I think that is the most important thing, is that practice builds confidence, and confidence helps you show up as more of yourself when you're in that interview or you're navigating the puzzle that is tech recruiting. You know, for me, building confidence was doing all of those programming questions and talking out loud through my head and understanding everything. For you, building confidence might look different, but find whatever that is, keep doing it, and then be sure that you can show up as your like confident full self for all your interviews.
Thank you, Safia. Session?
So I like to read, and a quote I like a lot is from Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones, where he's like, wear your flaws like armor, basically. So I interpret it as take what you consider your flaws and use those as your strength. Use that to your advantage. So for me in college, I was always feeling like, oh, I don't have enough experience. I just learned how to code 2 years ago. And I mean, some people have been doing it since like elementary school. Like, what can I bring to the table? And for me, I was like, initially I interpreted like all of the more artistic side of things. Like I play music and I sing and all these other things prior to college. And I was like, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Do I even bother putting it on my resume? And it reached a point where I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it and use the creativity part of myself as the thing that I lead with into my interviews. And it ended up really working out, and being able to think outside the box goes a long way in tech. Tech is kind of a very new field in a lot of ways. And we're always constantly discovering new ways to be more productive and to make more productive experiences, especially in dev. So I think being able to come in with the creativity and also having that lack of knowledge in some cases can help fill in some blind spots that a lot of folks who've been using a tool like Visual Studio for years might miss or just accept as it's fine, even though it may not be. And then when you're new to it, it's like, oh, actually, why don't we make this experience better, because it could be massively improved. So my advice would be take your flaws, use them as your strength, and use them to your advantage.
Oh, Will has his hand up just in case he wants to interrupt and give us an update. Go ahead.
Yep, so I see, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so I see a question in the chat from Fahad about recommendations for a path to Microsoft if someone wants to be a future software engineer, and maybe they start out by doing a coding apprenticeship, you know, maybe took the initiative to learn on their own. What would you recommend as a path to potentially one day becoming a software engineer at Microsoft? So I know there's a couple of folks on the panel that have a software engineering background, so I think that would be a good question for them.
Yeah. George, do you want to take that one as like a manager and a director? You've seen a couple of these different experiences.
Sure. I think it's actually just similar to your question too. Just what's the right recruiting advice right now? And I'll also be fair, like when I was doing recruiting for, like when I was going through that process as a candidate, most recently, that was some time ago. So I understand, you know, that's a little bit disconnected from what folks' experience might be today. One thing about just making the connections, these kind of events or any other kind of ways which you can just leverage your network and make a connection is really going to help on top of just dropping an application in on, you know, whatever links that you get to the career site. And another thing, again, if you're doing work already within your university or you know, within your boot camp or whatever program that kind of brought you into the technology sphere a little bit more deeply, go ahead and do that on GitHub if you want to, and just people will, like anyone who's reviewing a resume will just take a look and click through to your GitHub and see what you've been doing. And if you want to showcase kind of like something that you built or something that you think shows off the kind of work that you've been doing, just making sure that's really accessible directly on your resume as well. And folks definitely will take a look, and it's totally worth the click through. The biggest challenge that I see in the whole process is the interviewing process. And to be honest, we need to do a lot better job there, just all up as an industry. But my advice for folks who are going through that process is just practice, 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 kind of like Safia said. One of the statistics that people often call out is like, until you've done like your 5th interview, you're not really any good at it. And so find a way to get those like first 5 interviews, out of the way before you go to the ones that really matter. And those can be mock interviews with your friends, or with, like, if you have access to just any engineer who's like in a tech company, talking with them, getting them into that kind of mode where they're able to give you the feedback on how to do an interview and how you're coming across and how you might want to change and pivot your approach. That's both for the technical side and also just for like how you come across during the interview and what kind of things you might want to focus on.
Yeah, and I agree that, because Doran, I have actually seen you help getting people ready, people who are trying to transition even within Microsoft, moving to engineering jobs, where you've actually helped them go through those tech interviews. So thank you. Will, looks like we have another question.
Yep, the questions are starting to come in from the chat. So I see another one from Davies. And this one actually follows well with what Duran just shared about interviewing. And the question is around, what are the expectations during an interview? So if anyone can speak to, if I'm a software engineer applying for a career, Microsoft and the div, what can I expect during an interview?
Yeah, I'm gonna call Brandon out, because Brandon has seen various iterations of the engineering experience, and also David as a person who has interviewed people as well. So go ahead, Brandon, want to take this one?
Yes. The interview process, so I'll actually give some guidance on what specifically will happen for this event. Is once you apply to the position, and you'll get an email with a link that will allow you to apply. If you're a software engineer, there's going to be some sort of a basic qualification screen, and then if you meet those qualifications, you should expect to get what's called an OTS, or an online technical screen. And it's essentially just a sort of an online coding quiz to validate that you have kind of the coding qualifications to be an engineer here at Microsoft. And then that, I don't know the exact scoring of that, but if you score well enough on that, you will be set up for a set of interviews. And then you should expect an interview loop with maybe 3 or 4 different interviewers. They're going to ask you questions about your technical skills. They're also going to ask you questions about what we call core competencies, your ability to collaborate, your ability to resolve conflict, your ability to communicate well with coworkers. And then after that interview loop, the folks that interview you are going to get together and assess how you did and make a decision in terms of an offer or not.
To add to that, I've been doing interviews recently a lot, actually. I think one thing I want to say is Microsoft is a place where a lot of people want to work, and sometimes like just having the skills isn't enough if there are like a bunch of candidates for a role and they're better ones, right? Whatever better means for that role. If you don't get paid, it doesn't mean you're bad or you're an awful like developer or whatever. It just means that potentially there are better candidates that were suited for the role than you, right? So don't feel bad if you don't get the role the first time or the second time. Like some people have been trying for years to get in and they haven't gotten in. Like minimum bar, you have to be able to code, right? You have to be able to, for a software engineering interview, you have to be able to code. There are general interviewing things like if you do have projects that you've worked on, if you do have things you can talk about and show, that helps a lot. If you have experience, you want to talk about your experiences. Interviewers are looking for a proxy for where you fit in the company, your level, that kind of stuff. So anything that you can kind of share with the interviewer that would help them gauge that makes sense, right? I think beyond being able to code and answer technical questions, and I know the process because I've been helping candidates kind of go through this process and training to like understand leak code and solve problems and stuff. that's definitely a part of it that like the industry is trying to figure out if they should keep doing that or not. But the other part is just you and like, what do you bring that's unique, right? Do you have, imagine there were two candidates and they can code equally well, and one just worked on a ton of side projects, and maybe the other person didn't have time, right, to work on side projects because they have like more stuff to do. It's possible that in the interview, the one that has more projects because they have more time might come off as more passionate. And we do things to try to reduce the bias, but I will say, like, if you come off as being more interested in learning and understanding or doing more, that can be a nudge for you to get the position, right? Oh, and just remember, like, it's kind of zero sum. Like, if you have one role and a bunch of people, only one person can get the role, and there's a lot of roles. So I think you want to understand that just being able to code isn't good enough. You have to like have an oomph to kind of get into these big tech companies as well.
So I know we are at time, and I do want to quickly address some of the questions around the PM interview experience. So the PM interview experience at Microsoft, especially in the developer division, what we focus on more than anything is that we are data-driven and we are talking about understanding the customer. So we have an alternative interview framework, and I copied and pasted a link to that experience in the chat. And what that is that prior to your interview, we will give you something called a data packet. And what this data packet will have is that it will give you a use case scenario. One of them would be like, how do we increase the number of game developers using .NET, and we'll give you that kind of data that will help you to support that. And it's up to you to be as innovative as you would like in order and passionate in order to drive those values. So I wanted to share something real quick. I'm going to try sharing my screen for a second so I can show you the call to action. Then let me know if you can see my screen. I'll move Safi out of the way so she's not like showing on the, okay. So next steps here is that, first of all, we want you to come and join us, and we wish you all the best in the interview and application process. Check your email that will be coming from HBCU Connect, correct, Brandon? On the follow-up items. For any more,
That's right.
For any more questions about what like DevDiv has for you, like the different questions, like around what's a PM, what different roles exist, please reach out to the alias that we provided here, which is ddbamjobs@microsoft.com. I'll repeat that again, ddbamjobs@microsoft.com. Also, please fill out a survey for this event so you can enter a chance to get some DevDiv BAM swag. And this is going to have some of our latest really cool art that we've created with DevDiv BAM. So please look out for the next steps here. So once again, I want to thank every single person, especially if you're on the East Coast and it's 7:33 right now and you're with us. We appreciate you so much. If you're calling from overseas, we appreciate you so much. Wherever you are, thank you so much. And I'll hand it back to Will.
Thank you. Awesome job, Maria, moderating the event. And to our team of panelists, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share a little bit of insight, your experiences, and these opportunities with the Microsoft DevDiv team. So to our candidates, also, thank you all for coming. Without you all joining us, this event would not be possible. We will follow up with a post-event email that will give you those next steps, outlining what was shared here today. Also, we're going to send over a link for software engineers to get into the application system there with Microsoft, as well as program management professionals as well. So make sure you take your notes from this evening's event, brush up your resume, and submit those applications so that you can get a good look from the DevDiv team. Also, we'll recap that and send those links out via email, so you all can take action on that. But I want to thank everyone for joining us. Again, the Microsoft team, dev team for coming in and providing this great event, and to our candidates for making this event a reality. Thank you all, and have a great evening. We'll follow up with the event recording, but thank you and good night. Take care.